All right, you're being recorded. The meeting is yours.
Great. Welcome, everyone. First order of business tonight's the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible,
liberty and justice
for all. Great, thank you. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm Paul Savas, Clackamas County Commissioner and co-chair of C4. Mayor Hodson is doing his State of the City speech tonight, so he will not be joining us. We'll miss him. I'm looking down. Does everyone know each other? In the interest of time, I'm not sure. I think we all do. I don't see any new.
We actually have a few new faces here, but we could do that when we get to the business of C4, since there's a little bit of membership turnover.
Okay, great. We'll do that then. Good idea, Trent. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the February 3rd minutes. Is there any changes, comments, or a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to approve the minutes. I know it's hard to do this, take votes on Zoom. So is there anyone in opposition of approval of minutes, or are there any abstentions? Otherwise, I'll consider the minutes approved. Thank you. Next up, Trent, I guess we have a meet and greet for Bridgette Daisy, the Executive Director at Clackamas Workforce Partnership. Can you introduce her, Trent?
I think you took the words right out of my mouth. Bridgette is here at y'all's request to get more information about how to engage this group with economic development opportunities, and that includes the people who do that work. And Bridgette is on the front lines of that work for Clackamas County, and she is here to introduce herself and a little bit about what she does and how she can be a resource for you in your cities. Bridgette?
Thank you, Trent. Thank you, Commissioner Savas, and all for letting me join you tonight. I prepared some remarks just so that I don't go off topic, because I do have a lot to share with you all, so I'm going to stay on point. I'm Bridgette Daisy. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Executive Director of your nonprofit local workforce board, one of 9 statewide. Clackamas Workforce Partnership is a public-private partnership charged with setting the strategic direction, coordination, designing, and oversight of the public workforce system, WorkSource Clackamas, and America's Job Center. The system has several agencies, organizations, schools, and funding streams that participate as partners and co-investors. Clackamas Workforce Partnership works collaboratively with community-based organizations, business and industry, education, and local government to provide training, professional development, and employment support services to both job seekers, future workers, entrepreneurs, and employers. More information can be found at our website, which I'm happy to share after the meeting. Last month, we served 1,084 customers in WorkSource Clackamas alone, in both person and in person and virtually, with various targeted populations like veterans, dislocated workers, and migrant seasonal farm workers. WorkSource Clackamas is averaging 51 contacts per day over the past 4 weeks coming into WorkSource Clackamas, mostly virtual, with less than 10 people on average coming on site. As Clackamas County Certified Local Workforce Board, businesses in your communities have indicated that finding and keeping employees is a major issue of concern brought about by the pandemic. As leaders in your community, I'm sure you are aware of the many challenges individuals and employers in our county are facing due to the ongoing pandemic and its economic impacts. Individuals and families are struggling to cover the rising cost of food, housing, childcare, and more. Health and safety risks continue to be a concern to many. School closures and lack of childcare interrupt people's ability to work, and many workers are no longer inclined to accept jobs that are low paying, without benefits, and unpredictable. Employers of all types are struggling to fill positions and keep employees, which has limited their ability to maintain standard business operations and provide goods and services to their customers. Critical industries like healthcare, childcare, and education, utility services, and construction, among others, all face vast worker shortages that will stymie the growth of our county and its economy. Our system can offer some relief, but the impact is hindered by a need for increased collaboration. Despite the many challenges, there is an opportunity, a chance for us to work together in new and innovative ways with every voice at the table. As part of WorkSource Oregon, Clackamas Workforce Partnership partners come from a multitude of organizations, and we look forward to counting more of our public servants and elected leaders among them. We are exploring if there's interest in having Clackamas Workforce Partnership create a consortium of elected officials interested in engaging further with the public workforce system and other community networks. We were contacted originally by the City of Wilsonville City Councilor Joanne Linville, expressing an interest in participating in Clackamas Workforce Partnership, possibly as an ex officio member. Also, there are several reasons to get engaged with our work. A few to name, we have strong partnerships with our Oregon After School and Summer Network. There's an upcoming event hosted by the National League of Cities on March 2nd. They're releasing the results of a national municipal after school and summer learning survey, which reveals the evolution of municipal investments in youth programs throughout the pandemic. This full report will highlight an interactive data dashboard and reasons and recommendations for city leaders to consider getting involved. Also, the Construction Careers Pathways Project, an initiative began by Metro and championed by Clackamas County, working to expand the pool of talent in the construction industry and diversifying the industry through strategic public investments. City signing on the initiative will be a focus for all of us in the coming months. And Unite Oregon, a regional nonprofit who does amazing work with communities and people, is looking to build a climate resiliency hub. Within the hub, there will be training, support services, childcare, and wraparound services, with opportunities for housing connected to culturally specific resources. If any city or county has available property that they're willing to develop and connect on a public-private partnership with Unite Oregon, I know Unite and their executive director, Khan, would be very interested in connecting with you. There's lots of reasons to be having conversations together that include the social determinants of health, economic development, and the future livability and community thriving. So is this an issue that elected leaders like yourselves are interested in getting more engaged with? And if so, I'd like to invite you to have a more substantive conversation with our board in April. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Commissioner Savas or Trent.
Great, thank you, Bridgette. Are there any questions for Bridgette? Trent, do you see any, oh, there we go, any hands? Councilor Heisey.
Hi, Bridgette. Nice to see you again. We were just sharing a screen earlier this afternoon talking about the Child Care for All work that the county's also taking a lead on at the moment. I'm just wondering if there's any further information you could provide about that Unite Oregon opportunity, and because I can think of some potential parcels, and that's something that Milwaukee would, I think, be super excited in if we can make something fit.
I'll connect you with their executive director.
Wonderful.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, hands? Councilor Lewis.
Yes, thank you so much, Bridgette, for the overview. You mentioned at the end, if we have interest, I mean, the work is so important and critical to our part of the region. You said get in touch with your board for April. Can you just give us a little bit more about the next steps and how your board functions?
Absolutely. And I'll send a follow-up email to all of city councilors. Your contact information is easy to find, as well as your city managers to get connected. Our meeting is on April 21st. It runs from 8:30 to 10:45. Again, I'll send information. It will be virtual. Our board is a public-private partnership. It has 50% plus one private sector employer partners, 20% requirement for labor, apprenticeship, union, and youth-facing organizations, education partners, government, and our chief elected officials, which in our case is the Board of County Commissioners with Commissioner Schrader as our ex officio member.
Great.
Wonderful, thank you.
Next up, I see Mayor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. You already said you're going to send us that material, so that was great. I'd love to see it as well. And I really appreciate that Wilsonville City Councilor Joanne Linville, who I don't think was able to be here tonight because of a conflict, is really heading up our workforce development efforts. And we have employers who are really interested in working with us and other groups on this. So look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Great, excellent comments, excellent questions. Any other hands? Well,
Bridget, before you
thank
go too far, can you
Okay, go
make sure
ahead.
to put your contact information in the chat so that people can copy it before they go? And I can, once you get that in there, we can get you moving. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. And Bridgette, we appreciate it. And I know workforce is a big issue with the great resignation. We have a lot of vacancies in private sector, public sector, and we really appreciate your work. So thank you so much. All right. So Trent, what do we have next here?
We're kind of getting into the C4 annual business. And so March happens to be you're at the start of your C4 calendar year. It's a weird time to start things, but it's kind of tied to election seasons so that everyone can people get elected in November, they swear in January, it takes y'all some time to meet. Y'all appoint people who go to different committees, and that usually takes about a month or so. So it usually happens or shakes out that around March is when everyone's ready to go and tied it into their new sort of liaison roles. That's a little bit more around the city schedules, and that happens right after those sort of election years, which we got one coming up. So the cities will do their turnover. Some of them will do some of their turnover or reappointments, who's to say, at the election cycle this coming year. But on these even number years is when the non-city groups do their check-ins for their membership. And so today you have, I'm happy to announce that Mr. Martin Myers is continuing in the CPO seat, and over in the Hamlet seat, they have transitioned. It's now Kenny Cernak, who's here with us tonight from the Hamlet of Beaver Creek. And then his alternate is Derek Chirico, who is also in the attendee group with us tonight. So nice to have you here, Derek. And I believe the transit seats have also switched. There's not a requirement in the bylaws for them to do that. It's sort of a handshake agreement amongst all of them. For our urban transit providers, we have Smart and TriMet. And so Tom is now in the front seat for TriMet for the next year. And glad to see that Dwight is also, or was earlier. Am I missing him? I think he was here earlier, was here for a little bit. So will continue in the alternate role, so still part of C4 in that capacity. And then on the rural transit side, Todd Wood from Canby has stepped into the seat. Hi there, and will be in the seat for the next year until that handshake agreement continues at the next transition. So these are some new faces that you would not have seen maybe as much. Obviously, some of them are familiar faces like Tom, but we'll for those new folks, do y'all want to say hi real quick or do a quick introduction? Kenny, Todd, quick hello.
Hi.
Love it. There is one seat that's still missing that is requiring a little bit more work on our end, and it's filling the drinking water seat that's at C4. And remember that last year, Hugh Kalani passed away in the summertime. He was filling that water seat. We still have not filled that position. I'm working with the directors of those drinking water providers like Sunrise and Clackamas River Water to reappoint that seat. It's just taken a little bit longer, a little bit different of a process for them. So that more to come on that. We'll get them online as soon as we can, but I wanted y'all to know that we're working on that vacancy currently. And then at this time, if there's no other comments here on our membership turnover, it is the time to talk about who will represent the urban cities and the rural cities at the executive committee. And each of those groups have had a chance to chat via email over the last week. And this would be a good time to announce it. So we'll start with the urban cities. And I believe you'll have like a little, I wasn't part of that email chain, so I don't know who's going to be announced for that. Counselor Sherman.
I'll just jump in and share a couple of comments on that. We did have a little email chain that went around, and I think the consensus was Mayor Stemple has done a wonderful job of representing us on the executive committee. And while I was actually looking at challenging her, I was going to ask her if she'd like to arm wrestle for the position. I was pretty confident she would beat me anyway, so there was really no need to even go down that path. And so I won't speak for the whole group, but I think there's definitely a thumbs up that Mayor Stemple has indicated she'd be willing to continue in that role, which I think is probably a pretty good important fact as well. So I'm definitely supportive of her continuing in that role going forward.
Excellent. And then on the rural side, I know that Mayor Hodson is not here. He has been your executive committee member in the past. The emails, perhaps some of them happened without me, but Mayor Drinkwine or Mayor Kaiser, were there other emails that happened offline, or what say you?
I think we're leaving it with Mayor Hodson. Unless Mayor Drinkwine wants to object. And you are muted, Mayor Drinkwine.
I think Hudson was the one, definitely.
Onward. Well, this was usually my favorite meeting of the year because y'all would, in the in-person days, y'all would go to corners and y'all would huddle up, and it would be like, what are they talking about? And all the alternates would come over too, and then it would be kind of a mystery for a little bit. It was a fun way to do it. This email chain is less exciting, but also a little quicker for meeting purposes. But I can't wait to do it for hopefully next year. We can get back in those little groups and huddle and kind of see everybody back in that sort of environment again. I think that'll be a lot of fun. So the next step is that at the next C4 executive committee meeting, which will be March 14, they will reconvene and decide who will be the co-chair alongside Commissioner Savas for moving forward. So that's never a given, but they make that decision at that meeting, and we'll report back to y'all at the April meeting. So that really is the annual business. The bylaws are linked to the agenda packet. If there are any questions about the bylaws, you're certainly welcome to go through them. If you have questions now, I'll try to answer them as best as I can. If there's an opportunity to update the bylaws, if that's interesting, we can talk about that actually in the next conversation during the agenda topic priorities. That would usually happen, or a good time for that to happen would be at a retreat. So that's an opportunity if we end up doing or looking at another retreat for later in the year. But all things aside for business, I think that's what we needed. We have our continuation of those two executive committee seats. And then, I guess actually with the CPOs and Hamlets, Martin and Kenny, y'all should probably connect and talk about who would sit at that Hamlet/CPO seat. Perhaps that hasn't been decided yet, and I did not start that email chain, so that's on me, and we can make that decision perhaps between now and the 14th.
Yeah, Kenny, I'll reach out. If you could give me your email address, I'll text you. Thank you. We'll get it straightened out before our next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, any questions? No more questions about annual business? So fast, I missed the in-person stuff already. Okay, on to the C4 agenda topic priorities. And this is also me. So at your October virtual retreat that we did in 2021, y'all got together and talked about topics that were important to this group. And it ranged from tolling on I-205, which y'all have spent a lot of time talking about that. And we probably will spend a little bit of time tonight talking about it in the updates, as well as transit. And y'all spent some time on that, housing, jurisdictional updates, climate action plan, emergency preparedness, economic development, which is why we had Bridgette here earlier, strategic planning. How does climate involve, weave into a lot of your work here. It's been, again, since October, since y'all have had this conversation, and I put into your packet the sort of summary materials that came out of your retreat setting. I can pull that up for the purposes of y'all being able to see it, where y'all were able to rank like, oh, this is a high priority or a medium level priority. But it's actually really been relatively a long time And so do y'all want to bring that up as a tool to look at that? Or would y'all like to start this conversation a little more fresh? This is really a chance for y'all to tell me and the executive committee how to frame and set up and tee up conversations for this group to be effective for the next 12 months or so. So if there's one or two topics that really float to the top, if there's a variety of topics, we can figure out how to do those things. And of course, we're always flexible, as we have been the last few months, where 205 has just really dominated the conversation because of the decision points that we're at here at the regional level. Councilor Heisey?
I was just going to say that I think that we may get to a juncture sometime this spring where it would really be valuable to have DLCD's rulemaking revisited once they've actually adopted stuff, and also hear more about the county's process. I know Valerie knows more than I do about exactly where you all are at, but I think we're probably coming to a point where both of those things are kind of getting to a point where it'd be really helpful for us to learn more. So I'll just kind of put that out there.
That's my understanding too, that the climate action plan will come to fruition sometime in the summer. And so that could be a good time for that to float to the top. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's what I remember. DLCD would be close to getting to the end of their stuff by that time too. Mayor Lyle Smith.
Trent, yeah, I would concur with Councilor Heisey that I would like to get an update from DLCD on its impact to cities, or the expectations of how it could affect our cities once the rulemaking is final. I think I-205 is going to stay, or should probably stay, in our continual updates until the foreseeable future. I'm sure at some point it will be obvious when maybe it falls off of the priority list, but I don't think that's anytime soon. And I think our coordination on this topic is really important. It's been important. We've done some great things as a group, and I think that needs to continue. I would also love to get continuous updates on the housing, the Metro Housing Bond, and the housing piece. We've talked about that before, and I think we asked for regular updates from the county on the housing. And so I just kind of want to throw that out there. All of these are good topics. But those are my top priorities. I imagine this summer, if we have another wildfire season, we may circle back to emergency preparedness, but when we're out on that, but those are just my short comments for now.
Mayor Beck.
Thank you. I agree with what's already been said. I think this is going to be a big year for the supportive housing services measure, here in Clackamas, with the funds coming in, for the first time. So it would be great for this group to kind of stay on top of how those funds are being utilized, how the implementation is going, coordination with local jurisdictions, among, service providers, even amongst our law enforcement folks that have contact with our school districts. The other piece there too, I concur with, I-205. I mean, that's kind of staying top of mind for us as we go into this into this year ahead. I think will be a continued topic. What was the other thing? I'm sorry, I'm just lost my train of thought. It was something that we'll talk about this with updates, but that we're talking about at MPAC is, we have our affordable housing bond, which is building great projects. We have supportive housing services, providing, needed services. What we're really lacking is that capital for shelters. And as we see, almost every day in the news, the issue, the political issue around, shelter siting is a big one. So MPAC's having that conversation. I think that might be something that we talk about here in Clackamas, whether we're talking about transitional housing, with the motel program, or just in terms of family shelters and other shelters, and the barriers and tools we can use to ensure we have adequate space here within Clackamas County.
That definitely is shelter siting really hits in that land use world, and that is a part of C4 that has, I wouldn't say, been a little dormant for as long as I've been here. Transportation has really ruled the roost, as it were, and so that would bring in some land use minds, and we got some folks who can help facilitate those conversations. But as you noted, it's a little different for almost everyone because of how many cities we are fortunate to have here in Clackamas County. But also we also know that homelessness doesn't really have a border, and so working together on that, I think, is a good tool, and we can find out ways to do that here. That's what this group is sort of designed to accomplish. So thanks for that. Councilor Sherman.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the thing between obviously affordable housing, just housing services in general, and kind of tying that into land use. And we do, yeah, you're right. We have major land use changes coming this year that I think will be really interesting to understand how the different jurisdictions are weaving those into their communities. I think we'd also talked about like strategic planning, kind of getting out of our emergency all the time type mode, which granted, we're still in lots of emergencies, so it's hard to get out of that mode. But just kind of thinking forward as to how we start operating and doing things again for our communities, I think is going to be really important. And again, to coordinate the resources we have, across jurisdictions. The only question I would have, so does 205/tolling, does that conversation, I mean, does it kind of go on the back burner depending on how these, how the amendments go, the MTIP and RTP, that whether, I guess depending on how those decision points go in the next month and a half, that's going to determine how much at the forefront tolling will be in our discussions. So, I mean, that still may be a pretty hot topic for us going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can quickly say it's not going to go away super fast, but it ramped up really fast right there in the October, November season when we were starting to get close to the RMP decision process for JPACT. And that's coming to a head here in just a couple of weeks. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few moments, but depending on what those decisions are at JPACT here at the end of the month, and then of course what the OTC does and what they decide to do or not do with those federal dollars, could push over a different set of dominoes. So I don't think that the work will necessarily go away. It might be different, and that might mean that it needs less trips here to the C4 group, or it can stay in the diversion subcommittee, or it could stay at C4 Metro, depending on the evolution of the conversation. We'll see, but we are tracking it really close. If we need to make time for it, obviously it's one of those projects that affects literally every jurisdiction here, even out to Sandy, which is pretty wild, but we won't let it go too far away, of course. Mayor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Really good segue opportunity from the last speaker about the strategic planning. I was looking at our notes from when we looked at our topics, and you highlighted a number of things that had the most check marks, and we did a straw poll basically, and they're all really huge topics. But I was wondering, along the lines of strategic planning, here we have all these different cities in Clackamas County. We have all the major problems we discussed with transit, housing, and so forth. But I want to ask if we could think of a way to incorporate workforce development, as we heard about at the beginning of our meeting. I know we can't do everything, but if we can start looking for ways to work together and marshal our resources to develop opportunities for workforce development, because I remember, the topic of what can we do to slow the influx into homelessness. And it's a big project, but I'd like to see, as we develop housing, as we do some other things, that we could think of a coordinated way to help with workforce development, if that makes any sense. It's just a general statement that needs a lot of work, though.
Yep, it's here, it's on the list. As you kind of said, it has that area there. We have resources like Bridgette. The county does some workforce development pieces as well.
And I just think it's hard for every city to make a big impact in that area. So is there a way that together we could get more momentum?
And so is your recommendation to have like a specific conversation around that, or to bring in some workforce professionals to talk about those resources? Do you feel like that's a topic that can go to that April board meeting that Bridgette was talking about?
That's what I'm suggesting, and just to map out what, is everybody ready to do something in that regard now, or do we have too much on our plate? I just wanted to bring it up.
Gotcha. Maybe they'll raise their hand and respond to that in turn. Mayor Walters.
I believe Mayor Stemple was first.
Oh, sorry, Mayor Stemple.
You could have gone first. It's fine, because basically I'm just going to say ditto to everything that everyone else has been saying. I think climate action plan is going to be very, very important, and we don't want to divert from that. We also need to keep up with the DLCD talks. We need updates and impacts. I'm having people ask me questions about it every day and how it's going to impact the residential development in our town. 205 tolling, big, big, big. But one thing that I don't want to see us do is take emergency management and put it on the back burner. Because as all of you know, it doesn't do us any good to plan after the fact. We're very lucky that we haven't had anything in the past 12 months, but we're already seeing record heat in cities all over the United States. It's going to be another scorcher. So we want to make sure that that stays on the front burner, please.
That's really good. I actually have some staff outreach that I've asked to come to C4 to talk about debris management following disasters, and when is that an appropriate time to talk with this group about that?
Yeah.
So that's on track.
Yeah, that's a great one, because we had 900 dump trucks full of debris from the ice storm, and it took forever to get rid of, and was very, very expensive. What I was going to mention had to do with diversion, so it's kind of piggybacks on that. And a lot of the roads that people divert onto from I-205 are actually county roads. So I would love to see some standard designs and plans from the county of how we're going to discourage people from using those roads, be it slowing mechanisms, stop signs, speed bumps, lower speed limits. I think all of those would be really helpful to have in place as soon as possible.
Thank you. We got folks from the transportation team listening to that. Councilor Pratt.
I agree with everything people have said. I think that DLCD is going to be very important. And with the climate action, the task force is supposed to be meeting back up after the consultants have done some public outreach this spring, which I think it is almost spring. So I think the summer would be a great time to move forward with that topic.
Thank you. I am going to pull this down for the purposes of just being able to see each other and chat for a minute. I really heard just an echoing of what y'all talked about in October. And so also kind of with the new group, one thing that y'all didn't talk about that has also been a priority for here has been priorities in moving the transit discussion forward and coordination around transit. So we have 2 urban transit providers, we have multiple rural transit providers, and of course I use those words just in big categories. So there's a lot of opportunity for coordination amongst those providers to deliver the transit services throughout the county. And it's good opportunity. Many hands make light work in some ways, and also it's complicated by just a variety of other things. But this group has said, how can you complete the system? How can you shorten, ease those transitions from like one provider to another if someone's having to go through multiple providers? I have committed to this group to bring together all those transit providers in our little transit subcommittee. I haven't done that yet, but what was waiting for this conversation to talk about when would that priority need to happen. Y'all just had that transit conversation back in January, and so we can get that going here pretty fast and maybe prepare for an April or May or June discussion just to get that group together to come up with some recommendations on how, as a group, some of those sort of unified policies to help move that coordination along can be opportunities for you, whether that's a policy, whether that's, you know, creating, shortening those gaps, whether it's pursuing funding together, like system-wide funding, or looking at those, we've called them transit deserts in a couple spots here. I think this is a good group to start filling those gaps and broaden your capacity to deliver those multimodal needs. Commissioner Savas, I see that hand.
Yeah, I'm wondering, you know, I'm not asking to put the list back up again, but I'm wondering if we can think through and give maybe what things we can do as far as providing updates that we know we're actually putting some focus on or energy on. For example, emergency management. The county just initiated a committee task force to work on emergency preparedness. So we are actively working on that, and perhaps we can satisfy that need right there with an update on how that progress is going. On diversion, we have a diversion committee, and we can provide you updates on that. So I guess what the exec committee would want to look for as far as giving you a agenda that is, you know, that you feel good with, that we can actually make progress on, is what would we categorize as updates versus what we would categorize or put in the bucket of let's work on it or have more discussion and create something or work on something. So if you could put that list back up one more time with that in mind, you know, we're always trying to figure out exactly what to put on the agenda. And I'm excited because I had 21 years of being on C4. We've never had so much work and so much energy. So I just want to thank you all for that. But it's a lot for the executive committee to try to put together an agenda that fits, and then we don't want to leave something off. So your input here tonight would be extremely valuable to help guide us. So I'm just wondering, what are those, what do you see that we could actually put a lot of energy on, and maybe look at things that maybe are being covered by some other work that some committees have been assigned to do in that category? So Trent, you want to go down them one by one, or do you want to just take hands?
I think that hands make the most sense because it'll tell me where there's energy. I mean, I think some of the folks have probably already spoken. A lot of you already spoken. I think let's go through it one by one and see where it's different. I just kind of echoing what Commissioner Savage said. You'll have a lot of work to do and a lot of interest. You know, I got 12 meetings a year, you know, at best, and that's if you don't cancel the one that's right next to 4th of July or the one that comes right after New Year's. So maybe you have 10 meetings in the least of times, and if we're lucky and there's not a pandemic, we might also get a retreat. And so, yeah, there's a big list here, and we can do little updates here and there or create panels to diversify the type of information that you're receiving. But I would also encourage you to maybe pick something that's not named 205, because that's going to come at you naturally, but pick something that y'all think that y'all can go after and spend some dedicated time on and work towards. Maybe there's one or two things here that really meet that level for y'all. Rather than taking a full piecemeal approach, we can continue to do those variety updates and have those variety of committees come back. But if there's like one or two big things that you are trying to accomplish over the year, I think that would also help the executive committee ensure that they're prioritizing, that there are milestones and touch points and opportunities for this group to move forward with some collective or countywide sort of policies, kind of like what you were talking about with sheltering, Mayor Buck, or the transit needs that are countywide. Those feel like, in my opinion, as staffing this group, two areas where we could start to put together some conversations to help y'all be successful and to create some, you know, bridged policies that help people move around the county successfully.
Yeah, and if I could maybe throw out something for discussion here that as I look at this list, I think we need to spend some time on, because we don't have a path towards either solving it or addressing it or growing it. And I think we have committees assigned to a lot of the other stuff, not everything. But the one thing I'll throw out there we discuss a lot, but we need more work on, I think, is transit. Just like to get some input on that. We have a lot of the county that has zero transit. A good chunk of the county that has, you know, limited amount of transit, and very few areas that really have really great service. Counselor Heisey.
Yeah, and I like that suggestion. I guess where I'm feeling like there might be a gap in my understanding is I would honestly appreciate some direction from TriMet and the small transit providers on how they think further conversations with us around transit would be helpful. I'm all in if there's more that we can do. This is something that's really important to me, and I think there's so many different moving parts right now in terms of federal money and state money, and what the future of transit really looks like is kind of at this critical juncture where things might be changing. And if they are, I want to make sure that we're engaged in the conversation, but I need some more direction from our transit providers on how we can be most effective in that conversation.
Great. I see just in time, Tom Markgraf, TriMet.
I think this is excellent. We would jump into this with both, into the deep end of the pool, because I think it's necessary. I think it's long overdue. I think I mentioned to you a couple of 3 months ago that we're doing a comprehensive reanalysis of the entire system. And we're working with your staff on that, or the county staff rather, on that. And we're going to be able to, I understand, come up with some pretty interesting fact and figures on where we think transit is moving toward. The pandemic it's changed everything, right? It's changed the local centers of workforces. So that would be a good starting point, I think, to begin the conversation.
Great, thank you. Councilor Sherman.
Thank you. I do think, transit to me is very topical, just because, everything we're talking about with 205 and tolling and congestion relief and all that is so directly impacted by whether or not we have a robust transit system. So, that is for me, that's definitely a top of the list priority. I also do, and I guess I would maybe put this back out just for consideration. It seems like, at least from my perspective, that things like affordable housing opportunities, it seems like we're getting some traction right now, that there are some projects coming online. We've got some funding coming online. So it seems like from a timing perspective, that's also a pretty good time for us to be looking at how we can leverage resources and work together to forward that as well. So I think those two definitely go hand in hand for me as top priorities. Thank you.
Okay. Great. One thing I want to throw out there that is, I think, tied to that, because it's no secret, I don't think, to any of us, that the biggest challenge with transit is really where the money comes from, whether it's capital or whether it's coverage, O&M, and maintenance. So I really think we're at a constructive moment in time, at a juncture where we really need to keep talking about transportation funding, because gas tax revenues are going to drop and drop and drop. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but Ford, Chevrolet, a lot of the big producers are upping their timelines on electrification. So the internal combustion engines going away, the need for gasoline is going away. That means that our gas tax revenues that we live and die on for our roads are going away. So we've got to look at something different. We have the region that's talking about, ODOT in particular, is talking about tolling or congestion pricing. There's not a clear answer exactly if there's any revenue sharing. I know we're all working on that. There's the road user fee discussion that was tied to vehicle miles traveled, which is something that's going to tie into all new cars. That's an opportunity around the corner, but we need to have some certainty as to how transportation is funded. And I think we can be part of that. I think the League of Oregon Cities, I think the Association of Counties, and also at the national level, we got to be ready for that, because right now I'm not comfortable not knowing the answer. I don't know about you all, but I'm not really comfortable about that. And transit's part of that. How are we going to fund it in the future? I also saw that Mayor Lyle Smith in the chat had put up during this discussion, work on shelters. That might be something I think we can grow on, especially with new revenues coming in. I don't want to change the topic exactly right now. If there's more discussion on transit, But I think there are opportunities maybe for us to work together on sheltering, especially with the revenues that we're foreseen coming in, May or June with supportive housing services. We probably have to make some adjustments, I think, to the local improvement plan, or the LIP, that is. So anything else on transit or another priority? Kenny.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate the emergency preparedness item that a couple people mentioned. I know transit's a big one, but I think especially given the back-to-back issues we had with the fires and the ice storm, we need to make sure that also stays on the radar.
Okay. Now, are you okay with getting like a monthly update on the group that's just been put together to work on that, or would you like to actually have something more expansive?
I think an update would be all right.
Okay. Great. Mayor Lyle Smith, you put something in the chat. You want to speak to the shelter issue?
Sure. Yeah, and I've mentioned this to a couple of folks. So the shelters and homeless services, well, the Oregon City's desire is just that it's more coordinated amongst the county and that it's a shared responsibility amongst the region. I think we all understand it's a regional issue. We have a shelter. We have problems with that shelter. We'd like to move it. I think there's a need for more shelter. We know that there are neighboring cities who drop off their homeless folks at our shelter. So we would like to spread the love and spread the services. We don't want Oregon City to be the Mecca for homeless folks, as much as none of us like how Portland is looking. And I think it is a Clackamas County issue as much as it's a regional issue. And so I just would like for to make sure that our cities that are within Clackamas County are talking about, what are the boots on the ground doing? What are we doing to coordinate our services? Are there any other cities interested in a shelter, in transitional shelters? And I think, like we've talked about, there is a gap there for transitional shelters to get folks from being homeless to permanent housing. Our research and boots on the ground have essentially shown that taking someone that's homeless and just sticking them in affordable housing or permanent housing is not a good fit, that there does really need to be a transition along the way. So we feel like there's a gap there that includes providing more wraparound services. And so I would just like for it to be more coordinated around the county with multiple jurisdictions that are also experiencing these challenges.
Okay, that resonates with me. Mayor Fitzgerald.
And that's great that the way that you said that, Commissioner Lyles, because Mayor Lyles, because we have said that before, and I think it's great to hear it again, that we want to have coordinated a way of finding out where openings are, where we need things, kind of like a dashboard, action list. Maybe we give each other assignments, you know what I mean? Some strategy like that.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Kaiser.
Yeah, the other thing that would be nice when it comes to this is I know the county has come through a few of our cities, especially rural Clackamas County, and decided, they were going to try to get some of the motels switched over to transitional housing. And it'd be nice if before the county does stuff like that, it would be kind of coordinated with, the cities, so we can all be on the same page and it doesn't seem like we're in a battle against each other.
Yeah, we had that issue with Estacada, didn't we, Mayor Drinkwine?
Yes, we did. That was a big one. And I think that would have been a lot better if we as Clackamas County coordinated this whole thing and was sitting at the same table talking about where this is beneficial, where we can help each other, and where it all comes together. I agree totally. That is a very important one to have on this list. And then in this list, I think somewhere we have to look at mental health. We are not addressing the full problem here. We can look at homelessness till we're blue in the face, but unless we address mental health in some fashion or bring it into this conversation, we are spinning our wheels. So maybe adding that in as a discussion, maybe with the agencies that would be in charge of that, or how we can start up those systems, would probably help us in this immensely. That's just my thought. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I can't tell you how much that that resonates with me. I've been screaming and hollering, so to speak, about that very issue, the need for that. I think we are spinning our wheels. If we can't help people through their mental health crisis or their behavioral health crisis or drug and alcohol treatment, we are, I think, spinning our wheels and wasting a lot of money, and their lives are just compromised. Every week and every day that continues without help it's just a sad state of affairs that we just don't have enough provision of those services for those folks. So I agree. So what I heard a big thumbs up for transit, more for the sheltering housing services. Councillor Heisey, what would you like to add?
This is probably totally unnecessary, but first I'll say it is so nice that we all want to work together on things, and I'm just kind of want to say thank you. This is a really warm feeling to have, and I wish we were all in the same room together, and I look forward to that day, but we're not there yet. The other thing was just a couple of weeks ago, we had an excellent presentation at City Council from Vahid Brown from Clackamas County Services. And I think, I'm hearing a lot of the themes from his presentation and the conversation we're having, including mental health. And I would love to see us have him come and for there to be a conversation that really encompasses both mental health services and how we can better coordinate as cities to serve the houseless populations.
Great, thank you for that. I see Councillor Christine Lewis is next, and I want to say something, and maybe she can build on what she wants to share, plus build on what I'm about to say here, and that is that, you know, in the LIPs, there is some mention or provision of that, but there's also in the collection of the supportive housing services a set aside, and I don't know what the plans are for that set aside, but I've suggested that with the agreements that we signed with Metro and the counties, that we look at that set aside for perhaps whether it's bonding or building a facility for behavioral health, mental health, behavioral health and drug and alcohol treatment. I think we need to do something to step up our game. And what I hear from law enforcement, I hear from our firefighters, and I hear from our ambulance services contracts that they respond to these crises on the street. Right. And while they have other calls, that's not it's becoming their work, but it's not designed to, for their work. We've got to somehow give them a place to take folks because they don't really belong or should be taken to jail. That's for example, we got to have a place for those people to either detox or get the treatment they need. And I've seen systems in other counties that are far better than what we have here, but none of them here are local. So, Councillor Lewis, what can you add to that conversation?
Absolutely. I think people have touched on a number of important pieces, and the local implementation plan, Clackamas approved a very solid and well-written LIP. We should use that as our North Star. But what we're looking at is a population of folks who have all experienced some amount of trauma, some amount of breaking point, so that mental health and that behavioral health all the way into drugs and alcohol, that has to be part of it. And that's where the county has really specialized knowledge that, Metro doesn't have, that cities don't have. So I do hope that we can have that conversation here. The other piece is there are going to be opportunities to talk about how to prevent people from coming into homelessness that are not just about getting jobs and kind of the economic side, but are about making sure that we're maintaining our affordable housing stock, and not necessarily capital A affordable housing, but we have naturally occurring affordable housing in some old and dated apartments that are, at the lowest rents you see around. When those get bought by developers, flipped, totally upgraded, whole cloth, all those people out all at once, we need to be able to get ahead on that. And we need to not only have knowledge that it's happening, but we need to have the services and a plan in place for every single one of those doors. And I don't know how we get ahead of it. It's going to take working with the development community. It's going to be, it's going to take a lot of planning. And I don't think that there's anybody even thinking about that here in Clackamas County. We should task somebody with it and maybe come up with a plan for them.
Great, thank you for that.
I would
Mayor
just
Buck.
quickly jump in and say, on that point, and kind of going back to that conversation about hotel purchases, the state legislature is passing, or just passed, a lot of funding for housing. A lot of that is in the affordable housing game, and some of those funds are very similar to the type of funding that was described earlier to go and buy hotels that can be purchased and then retrofitted. One of the goals of Clackamas County during the legislative session was to ensure that that funding for hotels was able to be flexible, so that it wasn't just for hotels, but could be used for those types of purchases that you described, Councilor Lewis. And I'm pleased to say that we were pretty successful in that. You know, it's described as for purchases of hotels and other sorts of infrastructure. So that we are thinking about that. Our housing team is thinking about that. And now that we have that flexibility, we can start looking at those opportunities. Whereas before it was sort of restricted to just hotel type locations. And so there is good opportunity there. I just want to encourage you with that idea that we're on the same page.
Great. Mayor Buck.
Thank you, Commissioner. I was going to say what Trent said. Yeah, I'm kind of curious how the funds. So I hear about the $400 million package down at the state related to all different facets of housing. How that, and that's of course statewide, but up here in the metro area, how that will tie into supportive housing services measure, metro housing bond, and then these gaps that aren't currently funded. And I've also heard from our friends down in the state legislature about all this funding that they've created for behavioral health, for addiction services that's supposed to be leading to more beds and more treatment. I don't think any of us have actually seen how that's playing out, but I don't know if the county has information on how that money is being funneled through the system and how the capacity is being expanded. But if there's a way, if this committee is interested, I'm certainly very curious in hearing, because they think they're doing great things, you know, and I'm not saying they're not, but when I hear our friends of the legislature think they've got it, they're supplying the money, they're doing the things, and I think, okay, but we're not seeing it on the ground. So I don't know how, you know, how that money is being spent. And
yeah, Mayor, you bring up a good point. I do know that, like, for example, our ARPA dollars, some of that we have it, and we're actually hung up really with the staffing shortage of the county, which is really slowing our ability down to get the dollars out. We have a capacity issue in this region, even to actually maximize the supportive housing services dollars that are around the corner. I'm hearing from all the counties that there's staffing challenges. So if there is new money coming in for shelters or hotels or buildings that can be converted to that, and or dollars for mental health or facilities or beds, I guess we're gonna have to find a way. I think regionally, I jumped at that idea right off, because I think that that collaborative effort could really bring the human resources, the people, to help stand that up. And I don't know if Clackamas County can do it on its own, or the cities can do it on their own. I think it's going to be a collaborative effort if there's a regional facility, for example, or facilities. So I just never really seen it this bad. And when I mean bad, I really mean that the staffing shortages that we're experiencing in the county, and it's just slowing things down. I don't know about you all, but it's pretty bad. One thing I did want to I'm going to take a privilege here and just share with you. And some of these projects are in the cities, but I just thought I'd just run some numbers here, some housing, permanent housing that's been built. Some of this is affordable, and some of this is just middle housing or housing in general. But we built Rosewood Station here not too long ago, 220 units. Fuller Road Station's underway. That's 100 new units going to be coming online pretty soon. Good Shepherd out in Happy Valley, that's 142 units. Hillside Master Plan, that's stages. We just completed a renovation for 100 units, and there's another phase of 100 units, and then followed by 400 units. So that facility alone in Milwaukee was part of our housing authority inventory. We'll have a total of 600 units in that effort. Clayton Moore, another project that was built specifically for veterans, that's been online here for a couple of years. That was 24 units. The Maple Apartments in Oregon City, that's 171 units. The Webster Road Project, Mayor Semple, it's on its way. It's going to happen. 4 years past due, but 48 units there for housing for senior citizens. Axle Tree in Milwaukee, correct me where I'm wrong, Councilor Heisey, but I think there's 110 units there as I found. Wilsonville Frog Pond and housing, a mixture, 1,700 units approximately. That will be around the corner. Some of it's underway. Northwest Housing Alternatives has got a 48 unit project going on. Railroad Avenue, 234 units. Holyfield Village for seniors, 62 units, and Oak Ridge Place, 62 units. I know I'm leaving some off, but that's over 2,000 units, folks. Well over 2,000 units that's being built or has been built. So some of that's housing bond, some of that is the Metro Housing Bond, some of that is not. Some of that's privately done, is getting assistance, and so our staff are extremely busy, even as short-staffed as we are. I'm just impressed that we have those projects underway. But I just thought I'd give you that update. Some good news, maybe.
Mayor Kaiser?
Mayor Kaiser, yeah.
I apologize if this is a lack of information question, but all those cities that you just named with affordable housing, how come Estacada, Molalla, Colton, I understand Colton's a little bit smaller, but how come some of those rural cities aren't getting this? I never heard Canby, any of this funding, and what do we need to do to step up to be able to get some of that? I know we have our first affordable housing apartment complex coming into Molalla, but as time goes on, this is needed in the rural communities because that seems to be where a lot of the senior citizens are moving to get away from some of the politics and garbage going on in the bigger cities.
Yeah, great question, Mayor Kaiser. And I know that if Commissioner Schrader was here, she'd join me in saying that was one of our heartaches about the Metro Housing Bond, because it was only within, the housing bond. It was only within the boundaries of Metro, and we didn't have those funds, are not allowed to use those funds outside the boundaries. So I know that Commissioner Schrader and I think Commissioner Scholl met with Mayor Drinkwine and his staff about housing possibilities out there. That was last year during the COVID thing. I do know there's a project we're looking at in your city as well. I think it's 60 some odd units, if I understand. So if there's interest in the city, or there's land or a developer, our staff are still looking at it. So I do know that if Mayor Hodson was here, he could talk about some of the projects that have been going up, but I do know that there's quite a few projects they've been successfully stood up that are at the very minimum considered middle housing at the very least. So there's always room for more. And obviously our population numbers, if you look at the rural cities, it's growing significantly, and that doesn't happen without structures going up. So I think we're all doing our part, but I think we can do more.
Perfect. Thank you for your time.
You bet. Thanks for the question.
So I want to jump in quickly and just kind of note that I've heard a rise to the top on sheltering conversations and transit as a really high level. Those are the top two. Not that everything else doesn't get up there, but that those are really some areas where C4 feels like it could take the current energy of the region and kind of make it into something this group can localize and implement here to move those issues forward. And I'll work with the executive committee as well to ensure that there's opportunities that bring in these other topics like emergency preparedness, disaster management. Obviously, I-205 will come in from time to time, tolling, et cetera. But really those big two where it feels like y'all have both areas of interest and opportunities to create those bridges of policy amongst our variety of cities. Is that fair to say? Yes, Mayor Fitzgerald.
Well, I just want to know what about mental health? Where does that fit into the top two? Can we make it, or when we're talking housing, are we talking mental health? So I think this is really a moment to think about mental health. We just spent, I don't know how many years with an application for a mental health facility to be built in Wilsonville. And without getting into the politics and all the reasons, it was probably because of a certificate of need problem in the healthcare industry. And so I think this is an area that needs some study. If we all want more services, really, how do we get them? It's a problem. So I just wanted to see if we can elevate the mental health part to the top too.
Sure, behavioral health is absolutely part of supportive services, and so
Okay.
there's definitely a connectivity there with how to meet and respond to homeless individuals. When people are calling the local law enforcement on random stranger walking through neighborhood, whether that's the right decision or wrong decision. We work with the sheriff's department. We work with many of your law enforcement offices to have law enforcement officers trained in behavioral health responses. And so that's part of that social, housing service response that's going around right now. As those dollars are leveling up, that builds the capacity of our workforce team to go and help those individuals. So it is a public safety conversation. It's a housing conversation. It's a transit conversation. It's all kind of wrapped into that supportive housing services piece. It's really big. But yes, it's not excluded when we say, the sheltering and supportive housing stuff. It does not exclude. It actually includes some of that behavioral health piece there. And I'll be candid. Our director of behavioral health here at Clackamas County is incredibly well respected across the state. A lot of folks look to her. And if that's a visit that needs to happen with this group, we could certainly talk to Mary and figure out if that needs to happen. But I actually feeling like something towards the idea of a panel of some of those professionals to kind of educate about what we do here as a group and where those connections are already happening, to talk about where there are opportunities, where there's growth, where there's financial challenges, as I was described earlier. That seems like a potential topic we could put on the table in the coming months.
Trent, before we leave that, because I know the difference between services versus beds, and someone mentioned the word beds, and I mentioned capital, and Councilor Lewis spoke to that a little bit. I'm really wondering if we could maybe put that question or a letter, or maybe Councilor Lewis can make a suggestion, but if we think about a regional facility that is beds, right? It's a capital project, perhaps, and a staffing. We're going to stand up something, but I just wondering if a letter to Metro, asking to use those supportive housing services dollars or a carve out for that is viable. Is that a viable option?
Before we say yes, let's check in with our supportive housing services team. Let's give me a chance to go check in with Vahid, for example, and make sure what is encompassed in the work that's already there. I think there's other opportunities for capital, like with that $400 million that was just approved at the state level. It creates a lot of housing opportunities for small projects, micro projects, some beds. Some of that's sheltering beds. Clackamas County, I think, is expected to get $2 million for sheltering out of the legislature from this year. So we'll find a way to implement that quickly. There is opportunities for beds. Please give me a little bit of time to go and hunt that down to see where that can be an opportunity for this group to weigh in. Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, I think Trent, it would be great for you to do your follow-up. My initial thought is that we would have to nest it within what's in the LIP, or else we'd have to do an amendment to the LIP, and I'm not sure we want to do that in year 2, but smarter minds than I can disagree on year 2 is if that's the right time to do an amendment. The other approach might be to look at an application for the bond. The unexpected proceeds from the bond sale have been allocated for a blend or supportive housing. So we have, I think it's like $30 or $40 million specifically targeted from the bond for supportive housing. So that might be a way that we could make an appeal to Metro for some capital dollars that are outside of the bond allocation already in Clackamas's hands.
Okay, great, thank you. So Trent, so what are you sensing are at the top of the list besides transit and sheltering supportive housing services?
I mean, I think those are at the top of the list. That's going to consume quite a few of your meetings in addition to 205. I'll work really hard to find a way to move those other things into those gaps between those topics. But I will work with the transit team to figure out some next steps on how they can bring back action items for you based on what y'all discussed back in January about closing gaps and, you know, reaching those last miles, smoothing transitions and marketing availability of transit. So I'll work with the little transit staff subcommittee to get some recommendations on how this group can move forward there. And then I'll start working with Vahid and our behavioral health team and even our land use folks just to figure out how these sheltering conversations or even supportive services / mental health conversations can roll out, and where this group can actually get their hands around some potential action items to dive in and make those services more effective.
Okay, great. Well, good work, everyone. Thank you. You helped the executive committee focus, so well done. And that brings us to our next agenda item. Do we have Chris Lyons on board yet?
Oh yeah, I just sneakily invited him over, so we'll see how quick this goes really fast.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce the topic, Trent?
So this will be a legislative update. The state legislative session has to close here by the end of Sunday, and they are currently in their sort of final days. Most of the bills have either passed or are about to pass, but it's just, they're all on the floor, and Robot is reading them through passage, and Chris is now in here, so he can fill in the rest.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Yeah, I'm happy to report that we are currently, I think, in day 31 of the 35-day session, and they are expected to wrap up tomorrow. So they are fast tracking things as of now, and we'll see, but that's the current thinking. As we've talked about before, these short sessions were initially designed for making small budget tweaks and policy tweaks, but this was a session anything but. The budget this session was huge. It was, I think, just shy of $6 billion. And so I was going to just mention a few of the key areas that are being funded, some of which you've touched on already. First, and I'm happy to report, we were successful on our top priority for the county, getting the expenditure limitation on our county courthouse of $94.5 million. So hooray. The next milestone on that project is that in June, the board will be presented with the recommended project company and the final project agreement for approval. So that will be moving forward now that the state has taken its action. One large bucket of funding that you've touched on is housing and homelessness. They have approved a $400 million package that includes a whole range of different elements and components on this. A few noteworthy pieces I'll add. One is that Clackamas County will be receiving $2 million directly to help with shelters. There's also an $80 million pot to address homelessness needs statewide, and they'll be using the Community Action Network for doling those out. So yet more dollars will be coming to Clackamas through that. And to your earlier conversation about Project Turnkey, they did once again fund that to the tune of $50 million. And the language, as Trent mentioned, it's very flexible. It actually just says for converting buildings to shelter. So we're thrilled by that flexibility. I understand it's going to be administered once again by the Oregon Community Foundation, and there will be an RFP type process on that funding. So our team undoubtedly will start working on that right away if they haven't already. Definitely a good opportunity to partner. Another funding bucket is 100, which you talked about, behavioral health. There was $132 million allocated to OHA to support the behavioral health workforce. And they are to stand up a grant program to help increase wages of practitioners, offer retention bonuses, and recruit and hire new behavioral health staff. So that's, an immense need right now, and that is thought to really help them with all these shortages. Another big bucket is $200 million to support the governor's workforce package, which is called Future Ready Oregon. It's a jobs training package, and it's primarily targeting a few industries, healthcare, manufacturing, and the construction sector. And then $150 million for a summer learning package for, I think, K through 8 and K through 12. There's different components in there, enrichment activities for youth in the summer. So that's, just a high-level summary of some of the major funding buckets. They also tackled a number of policy items. They passed a private forest accord just a day or two ago. They passed the farm worker overtime bill. There was a big public safety bill. And they passed a framework that will dictate the distribution of funds that Oregon's going to be receiving in the national settlement agreement with the major opioid producers and distributors. And then last but not least, 205, while the legislature itself didn't take any action this session, the Clackamas caucus was very active. Actually at the beginning of February, and we might have talked about this before, they had sent their letter to the Oregon Transportation Commission raising a number of concerns, did not receive a response. And so they chose to elevate their concerns. And just last night, they sent a letter to each member of the federal delegation, laying out all of their concerns and asking for their support. And I understand that ODOT was meeting with the members of our federal delegation today, in fact. So I believe that was a very well-timed letter. And here shortly, Jamie Stasny will be on to talk more about 205. So just in closing, and to hit on the comments that Councillor Heisey mentioned about working together, I do want to give a big shout out to the Clackamas caucus. Again, they were instrumental in a lot of these pieces, especially the courthouse in 205 and these countywide priorities. And we learned just in the past few days that a few of the members of our caucus are not going to be coming back to the legislature, which is a big disappointment. Reps Power, Prusak, and Williams all have chosen to not run for re-election. So a big loss for Clackamas County, I think, and we'll have some big shoes to fill. So I would encourage you to reach out to all of our legislators and thank them for all of their work, because they really hit it out of the park. So with that, I'll close and happy to answer any questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris, for the update. Very exciting stuff and a lot of new dollars coming our way. So excellent. Trent, this brings us to, looks like updates here. Other business, I see JPAC. So Councillor Heisey, what do you have for us?
Well, the real order of business continues to be the conversation about I-205, and I am turning to my notes. You all are pretty well up to speed on what's going on at 205. And we'll hear more about that shortly. There's also been some action on just ongoing reporting out on the emerging transportation trends that continues to be really interesting. I'm happy to send you the links to those reports if you're interested. We had an update on the RTP process that continues to move along. They're really looking at a 20-year plan, and they are taking into account the governor's order on climate change and making sure that the RTP update is kind of taking that all into account, so we don't have to do this twice. And other than that, we had a letter about FTA discretionary funds, and let's see, gosh, what was that? Councillor Lewis might be able to pull this out of her notes better than I can, because my writing is terrible, it turns out. Why wasn't I a doctor? It was a letter that sent the priorities to the congressional delegate to set the stage for when we're asking for grant funds in the future. And just trying to really have a good vetting process for creating a list of those and making it, building the platform for future requests effectively, so that when we go in the next time around, when there's a big chunk of change, our federal delegation already knows what the regional needs are. And I-205 and transit along I-205 was one of the 6 priorities that made it onto that list, which was very good, very nice to see. We are getting strong support when it comes to continuing to raise the issues there and the issues of making sure that congestion pricing works when it rolls out across the region.
Great. Councilor Sherman, do you want to give us an impact update?
And drop a little bit on MPAC. Of course, we're, as always, we're talking 205. We also received an update on the emerging transportation trends, which I think has been, really interesting, just because there are a lot of the trends aren't necessarily in alignment with some of the assumptions that we're making as we look at things like congestion pricing and things like that. Just a lot of it will potentially require some policy changes and some analysis when we're looking at, changes from like commute trips to other trips, or personal shopping changes to delivery, the timing of trips changes in kind of this new normal. So that was kind of interesting. And then also we did receive an update on the business food waste requirement going into effect March 31st. And that was a 2-year delay on that. And I know that at least, my city, Happy Valley, has an IGA in place with the county to move forward with that. And that was the food scrap collection services that'll be imposed on certain types of businesses going forward. Mayor Buck, anything to, did I miss anything on that?
No, that was good. The other, just that piece on the emerging transportation trends, it was interesting, was the transit use, being way down and expected to not really, even as transit service is recovering, back to normal levels, the ridership it could take years to get back to where it was before the pandemic. And a piece of that has to do with people's, safety, feeling safe on transit. And the other thing on safety was just the driving under the influence is on the rise, and one of the contributing factors to pedestrian deaths on the streets. So
I think that's actually, you hit on one that it was a really, actually I thought very powerful graph that was showing transportation trends, and they projected out that in 2045 we will still not have recovered to the pre-pandemic transit usage in the region. That's important. That's a really important. So one of the takeaways is, how do we get people back into the transit mode, and how does that move forward? So that was pretty interesting.
Wow, great. Councilor Pratt, climate action.
I don't have a whole lot because we haven't met. The Board of Commissioners, as Commissioner Savas probably knows, they extended the adoption goal date to 2023. So there were some negotiations with the consultants, and also they've asked for more community engagement. Our group is supposed to meet after that community engagement to give us an update of all that and move forward with next steps after that. So I will let you know when there's more to talk about.
Great, thank you. Trent, what's the latest number on supportive housing services dollars?
I'm so glad you asked. In the chat, I just posted a memo that was shared with the Board of County Commissioners on Tuesday, which provides that financial analysis month to date. It's what's come into Clackamas County so far. There is a $5 million advance that's come from Metro. Thank you very much. As well as about $1.6 million that has come in from the tax disbursements. January and February have been relatively good years. And of course, we're expecting that to continue to increase as tax season hits full swing here these next couple of months. So that document that's in there will give you the details with all the numbers that you're looking for. With all the work. And if you want to hear Mr. Vahid Brown talk about that, you can go catch our recording from the Tuesday meeting, which is posted online.
Great. I'll just add to that a little bit. The second round of $5 million advance request was approved on Tuesday. It has been delayed, so to speak, because it was contingent upon the agreements being signed between Metro and the counties, in this case, Clackamas County. So that was done in January. So took a little bit longer than we thought, but that next $5 million advance will help us ramp up to the upcoming dollars. And I want to thank Councilor Lewis for her work and cooperation. And that will be processed, and hopefully our attorneys will get together and craft that next piece, and we'll get those dollars on the street, ideally. We wanted to take some time out and talk a little bit on the more lengthy discussion about I-205. So we're ahead of schedule, kind of deliberately. And Trent, how do you want to approach that?
So we put this in other business because, you've really covered a lot of work on this over the last several months, and yet there is still more work to keep doing. So as things change, it feels like daily for Jamie and me and Chris as we keep working on 205 things. And as we keep working with many of your staff, I'll say, Jamie and Chris and I, we get to talk to you on these first Thursdays, but we really do work with all of your staff throughout the whole month. And so we really just want to say thank you to everybody for letting us work with you. This really has been a team effort. So there's a good opportunity there for us to just say thanks. It's not just us. It's just us that gets to talk to you very often. But with that in mind, we have a lot of touch points coming up. March is a very busy month for 205 because it's really a lot of these decision points that we've been talking about are coming to a head. And we wanted to make sure that you had the latest and greatest. A little bit of time for discussion here because tomorrow is TPAC, where TPAC will discuss and potentially make a recommendation on what JPAC and IMPAC eventually do later in the month. In your packet is all of the resolutions and other materials that many of y'all have completed or signed or passed the last couple of weeks. And so we just wanted y'all to have all this information, and Jamie's going to give you a little bit more of the in the weeds here so that y'all are just up to speed as you can be as y'all get ready to move towards that JPAC conversation and the C4 Metro subcommittee discussion in advance of that on March 16th. So Jamie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trent. And hey, everybody, good to see you again. Everyone's looking so peppy for this, what is it, Thursday evening. It's late, I know. So I'll try and be brief, but to Trent's point, we thought this was a really well-timed meeting to give you an update, make sure you had the latest and greatest, as Trent said. I also want to echo what Trent said about your staff. This project and this process has been incredibly complicated. It's really technical, it's challenging, we've never done it before, and your staff have all stepped up and collaborated so graciously with us. I'm just so grateful and really proud to be a part of this Clackamas team, so thank you. So with that said, I'll, like I said, try and be quick. Since last I was here with you, a lot of things have happened. You're pretty up to speed, I know. There was a TPAC meeting where the 205 amendments were considered. TPAC asked JPAC, hey, could you give us some more time so that we can actually do some more work to make these amendments something that we might be able to approve? JPAC met and said, yeah, we'll give you some more time. Here's the concerns we want you to address. And those were summarized during the meeting. Since that time, and this is really the big update, we've been working with your staff. We've all been working with our regional partners, with Metro. Everyone's been coming together, working with ODOT as well to try and come up with some changes to the amendments to make them more palatable so they address many of the concerns that have been voiced by your cities, by the county, by the members of JPAC. And so heading into that TPAC meeting tomorrow morning, I pasted a link in the chat to the packet. It is over 600 pages, so please do not read all of that. I put some page numbers in there if you're curious and want to spend some time. A lot of new information has been generated. This is good news because it means more information, more transparency. ODOT's sharing a lot, answering a lot of questions that we've had. So in that packet, you will see a 59-page section called the 6 things, the 6 big things. And that summarizes kind of the big concerns that ODOT has heard, how they're trying to address them. And then the rest of the pages are like the backup, why they're answering the questions the way they are. There's another page number indicated there. That is a 4-page commitments list that ODOT is putting out there and wants to make to the region. So there's some homework if you guys want to check it out later. So all of that said, I think staff reviewed all of that and thought, great, really appreciate the transparency, and also at the same time still have some concerns. And many of those concerns were brought up at JPACT. Number one, I think in my mind is, how is that codified? How do we actually hold ODOT accountable to the commitments they're making? It's not clear. So that's a concern. And another key concern that is still rising up in staff's mind is one of the key issues that's been reiterated and communicated by the county, by many of your cities, by our other regional partners, is that we don't want to see 205 tolled before the RMPP has federal approval. A pretty simple thing, like, hey, or let's make sure we have a plan so we're not the only ones that get tolled, right? It's pretty simple. That seems to be a no-go for ODOT, or at least it did until this afternoon. We did receive information that they are open to talking about that. So stepping back a little bit, staff didn't feel like these commitments were sufficient because they don't, even if they are codified or referenced in resolution, they don't have a lot of teeth to them. So staff generated an amendment to the RTP, which summarizes many of these commitments and includes key points like, hey, don't toll 205 until the RMPP has federal approval. That document was submitted to TPAC and has been circulated. This afternoon, I received a note from ODOT, had a meeting with them where they said they actually support the amendments that were brought forward and submitted to the RTP document with some minor revisions. And that will be the discussion topic for TPAC tomorrow, I think, is like, what are the things where we're not able to really connect? And so that one, they did say there is some language in there that if you watch the meeting tomorrow or see the materials afterwards, there will be some discussion around that. They are open, according to their staff, to saying they won't toll 205 until the RMPP is approved. They didn't want to leave the word by the FHWA in there, so it's a little looser, but I guess I'm just saying this is way down in the weeds, but I wanted to show you and to communicate that there's been a lot of good work done here. There's a lot more transparency. We've come a long way. We've worked really hard together. We're still missing on that key point. I think it's not quite what we'd like it to be, but there's been a lot of movement. So I'm happy to share that update. And I also want to add one other piece, which is there's an RTP amendment, and then there's also an MTIP amendment. The MTIP amendment is where they actually program the dollars that the OTC authorized almost a year ago, so they can do the NEPA work and they can do the preliminary engineering work. An idea came up to essentially narrow the scope of that MTIP amendment so that they can do the NEPA work, but wait on the preliminary engineering of the gantries until we get through the NEPA and get some of the questions answered. So narrowing the scope. So instead of $28 million amendment, it becomes a $20 million amendment, and then they can come back and ask for the other $8 million later this summer or whenever is appropriate for them. It also serves to create another checkpoint with JPACT so that they can show us that they are doing the things that they've made the commitments to do, and we're building trust, so they have a check-in point. So that will also be raised tomorrow at TPAC, and that amendment will be brought forward. So I know that was very weedy, and I don't want to go any deeper, but I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you for letting me speak tonight, even though we didn't really have it set on the agenda.
Councilor Heisey. Yeah, Jamie, I want to just share with everyone what occurred at the R1 Act, or would you like to cover that? It seems like ODOT has, for those of you who don't know, the R1 Act meets every other month, and it's made up of the counties, most of Washington County, all of Clackamas, all of Hood River County, and all of Multnomah County for the most part. And Mayor Hodson and I and others sit on that committee. And then here late last year, they opened up on the other month, like I said, every other month. So yesterday was our one of those months where they had was called the R1 Act Plus. So we've been meeting and they've been talking about nothing but the tolling program. And that's really, it's been really basically an opportunity for ODOT to present to us, simply present. Well, in I guess their attempts to try to involve us more and kind of meet some of our requests, they've kind of elevated and are talking about elevating either the entire committee or another construct of the committee to be advisory to ODOT and to the OTC, I believe. What I will add is when they did create this new R1 Act Plus, they included Clark County and Vancouver and so forth into that group. So it's a larger group in the R1 Act and potentially could be larger. And yesterday I requested that they include as stakeholders, the city of West Lynn and the city of Oregon City and Gladstone, I think was also mentioned, and the rural areas along Stafford area, perhaps, or greater representation along that I-205 corridor. So we'll see. They're going to talk about codifying or pretty new bylaws. Jamie, do you have any updates or anything you'd like to add to that in particular?
I'll just add that creation of that group is in response to requests from JPACT and from many of you in your cities and from the county to have more local engagement and direct recommendation power to the OTC. So it is a response. It's part of the commitments that they're making. And it's detailed in some of those links that I shared in the chat if you want more information about how they're thinking about that evolving.
Great. Councilor Heise, you had your hand up, or is that a leftover hand up, or?
It's actually a whole fresh hand.
Okay, good.
No, I I had occasion to speak with Mayor Gamba, who's our other R1 Act rep, earlier today, and he mentioned that there may also be the possibility of adding Canby and lifting some even more of the rural voice. We know Canby's already experiencing diversion. And also thinking about other folks like a technical expert on climate, so that we're getting some real advice from people who understand numbers, not just those of us who think we do, on how regional congestion pricing is really impacting climate for the better.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. So for those of you who don't know, Mayor Hodgson has a seat on the R1 Act. And I assume that on this R1 Act Plus, they hopefully will not take Mayor Hodgson away, but maybe specifically citing Canby have a membership might be important because of the diversion. So that might be something, Jamie, if you could just, in your work and communication with ODOT, make sure it's cited as one of the stakeholders to that point.
And is the task force the same as R1 Act Plus, or are they two different entities? You're still sorting that out.
Yeah, we're still
Okay.
So Mayor Hodgson was in attendance last night as a panelist. So it's not Mayor Hodgson's seat on R1 Act is to represent rural cities in Clackamas County, just as Mayor Gamba's role is to represent urban cities in Clackamas County. Great. Any other comments, questions, updates, anything for the good of the order? Trent, do we leave anything out? Wow, we're early. Nope. Go ahead, Jamie.
Thank you. I just wanted to recognize by name Jamie Lorenzini and Karen Bureg. Those are our two TPAC reps, and those two people have been working so hard. So I just want to make sure those applause, appreciate that, and just want to make sure they're for Karen and Jamie. They have worked so hard, and Dana too. So thank you.
Yeah, and I want to give my a shout out to not just Jamie and the Jamies and Dana and everyone else who's working on this, but to shout out to all the staff in the region. We have never been in this place before where there's been so much unity at the regional level. We have Washington County, Multnomah County, mayors, councilors. We've got so much momentum behind us, and you know, we just got to cherish the moment that we're all working together as a huge team, larger team than ever. So hats off to everyone, kudos. And thank you so much. And if there's nothing else for the good of the order, you all have a very safe drive home. Thank you. We're adjourned.